top of the table.
I'm certain there must be a song that reminds you of your first love, or one that makes you cry remembering someone. We've all had times when we were down in the dumps and found music as our only escape, a way to cope and express our emotions like never before. From classical and jazz music to rock and hip hop, there's plenty of genres, artists, and albums to choose from. Phrases like music is my life and music is therapeutic for me are used in abundance. But what is it that makes music so special for us? What is it about music that uplifts us when we are sad and makes us almost euphoric when we are happy? And how can music serve as an effective alternative form of therapy? We will speak about this and much more in today's episode of Top of the Table. Hi, I'm Sheetal Sharma, your host, and with me is renowned clinical music therapist Kamal Singh. Hi, Kamal. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Sheetal.
So, Kamal, first and foremost, your designation basically says clinical music therapist, and honestly, in my mind, there is nothing clinical about music. Could you please explain this to me a little more?
So basically, this was something we kind of like sat down together. When I say we, it's like when I was studying, and then after that, we were trying to this is like a new thing in India at that time, and we were like thinking about how we can clarify that this is based in research and also based in methods that are studied, and there are case studies, and it's a systematic research-based intervention method, and so that's why we're using this word clinical to kind of specify that. Yeah, that's the main reason why that word is being used. But the method of interaction is still the same. So you're right. There is nothing clinical about the work as we practice and as we interact with people, or if I'm working with somebody, whether it's listening or playing with somebody, the approach has nothing clinical about it in terms of when you're working with a person, right? But the foundation is clinical and it is research based, and that's what we're kind of trying to specify there.
True, Kamal. So that kind of lays ground that, there is nothing clinical about it, particularly something that was, kind of making me, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners, intrigued about the word clinical music therapist.
Mhm.
Anyways, so moving ahead, Kamal, tell me something. I mean, like I was saying in my introduction, that, music has this power of taking you to a certain memory, a certain time, of your life, and literally bringing it back in your memory, making it alive. What is it about music, and how does a music uplift or possibly make you get into certain modes?
Yeah, so these two words that you used, time and memory, it takes you back, it takes you back to a certain time. It also brings back memories from that time. So I think there's a lot of, the subconscious mind, the subconscious part of our thoughts, our brain. Maybe let me just say the brain. So the brain and music, forget about subconscious, maybe the whole brain. So the music and the brain is a very interesting space, and there's still very less data to kind of to talk about, but there's enough studies to show that the music and the brain connection is beyond what we can imagine it to be. So for example, memory is one big area, so songs remain. So I've worked with Alzheimer's patients, and sometimes things are difficult with them. They can't communicate, they've lost memory, they've forgotten how to do things, they feel incapable maybe. But then through a song, suddenly everything comes back, because they might have forgotten many things, but then these lyrics somehow come back. Or they've forgotten how to do many things. Maybe they don't know how to even like put on clothes maybe, but they will remember how to sing a particular song, and the tune, the lyrics are all in place, So there's a lot of connection between the brain and music. Well, there's also a lot of data that we've seen where people are listening to music, and there are these scans that they do right over there on the brain, and many of these studies show that during activities like this, the whole brain is active, not just a particular area. So let's say you're dancing or you're talking, there are certain aspects of the brain at that point that are kind of in charge of that facility or doing that action. But when you're listening to music, it doesn't really matter. Everything is functioning, everything is heightened.
So, Kamal, it's literally like a hidden code which is there in your subconscious mind, which kind of gets triggered the moment you listen to a particular song or a particular music piece?
Yeah, maybe the brain stores things associated through music a lot more than. So, I mean, you can, let's say you forget how to speak, you know, or you can't speak. And this is based on another case, actually. I'm not just making this up. So there's this person who had a head injury, and then part of their brain had to be removed because it was damaged. So technically he cannot speak. So he learned how to communicate with language in English, which he cannot do. It's not possible because that area of the brain was affected and it was physically removed, right? But through these interventions, and music therapy being one of the major interventions for him, he learned how to communicate in English again through words, because they use music as another way to kind of speak. So he would speak in a tune. So, hi Sheetal, as opposed to hi Sheetal, Sheetal, like that. And then it becomes possible to say those things.
Okay. That's very interesting, Kamal. And in fact, it's actually I feel that the human brain has got so much of power, and we have literally not even tapped into like 1% of it. And there's so much more that we kind of realize with cases like this that you're talking about. So tell me something, Kamal. I mean, you do this day in and day out, right? This is your profession, that you heal people with music. Now, how does that happen? I mean, a music piece triggering a memory is still understandable, but music as a healing tool, I mean, how does that function?
Maybe let me clarify that part first. So this healing idea, right? I'm not against it or anything like that, but I don't like to use that word too much in terms of this process that I have, right? I see myself more like a facilitator, and so I kind of facilitate this process which involves music and whatever else might be happening. It can be like maybe Alzheimer's, it can be cancer, it can be maybe trauma, abuse, it can be depression, suicidal thought, self-doubt, anxiety, whatever it might be. It really doesn't matter. It could be a special needs child. So that process that the person is going to have to go through to overcome what they've been through, the trauma or whatever else might be happening at the point, fear in some other way, that process where they can empower themselves is the process of healing. No? So that might be the process of healing, but music therapy or this intervention is not the healing process. I guess it's this process where we use music facilitates the process of empowerment, maybe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does to a certain extent. So, Kamal, tell me something. I mean, when you talk about music as a process and you being the facilitator, and you've taken names of some very, very, grave mental health concerns like Alzheimer's or anxiety or people with depression. Do you have any kind of examples from your own, like work life, which you can possibly share without breaching the confidentiality?
So let me try. Maybe I'll speak of it in this way. Without giving you an example, I can maybe talk about that process, and how music comes in there. So let's take trauma, for example, right? Okay, so we're taking trauma, for example, based on, let's say, something, okay, let's talk maybe physical abuse, sexual abuse or something like that. Or cancer, right? Somebody is dealing with cancer. Somewhere here, fear is a big part of the whole thing. And maybe there's very less that the person wants to communicate. There's very less that the person wants to revisit. There's very less that the person even understands. Maybe there's a lot that the person judges themselves with. Maybe there's a loss of confidence in some ways. And maybe there's also this confusion, like this splitting of the person into two different things. On one hand, they acknowledge one thing. On the other hand, they blame themselves. So all these complexities exist, which you're aware of. But now, where does music come in? I guess we move away from the talking about this and we go into like the part where we're trying to find something to connect to. So for example, if I say, let's write a song or let's listen to some song. Would you like to play a song? Would you like to listen to a song together? Now, we might start with something very simple like that, which is very easy to do. So that person might bring a song in and we listen to that song together. Now we start talking about the lyrics, maybe, or why this song is chosen. And maybe eventually, without even realizing, because we're focusing on the music here and the lyrics, which is external, maybe this person starts feeling comfortable enough to speak about something which they don't necessarily want to do in a very conscious way. They don't want to do, but then they start doing it. Now, as we go further, they begin to feel this. There's some relationship that starts to form between me and this client because something new is happening here, no? And it's not based on what they're aware of. So there's this relationship we start to build in the music through listening, playing together. I might play something for them, they might play something for me, and then we have this very close relationship that we start forming. And from there, we start addressing the same thing that any other psychologist might want to explore, and maybe any other psychologist will be wanting to do. So we build everything around the music, Shidal. And so that relationship is very different.
True, Kamal. And there's one thought that kept coming to my mind while you were talking about all of this. What I also feel is that, and I was reading this somewhere as well, when we are talking about human beings and their behavioral patterns, etc., it's basically the child in you which is kind of reacting to situations in a certain way, right? And there is a lot of, memory and history to that entire thing. And when you look at children honestly respond much better to music than they do to anything else. So I think that what we are also trying to do through music therapy is possibly tapping into that inner child. Would that be right?
Yes, that's true. That's true, but not necessarily focusing on the inner child, but the attachment maybe.
Okay.
Or maybe something that happened during the attachment process. So like focusing on the attachment maybe, and maybe also the things that got formed at that time, the belief systems or the values that were picked up during that time. Now, when we do it through music, again, it's a little bit different because we are willing to talk about those things which exist that might not be something like, for example, if I speak to you about, let's say I'm having a dream that is consistent, and it always happens where I see like a lot of fish in a pond and they're always there. I always have this dream. Maybe there are like these small puppies or like, small birds that come in my dream. And now I don't know what to do about this. And speaking to you about it is a little bit weird. And also not much can come out of it because unless you're doing some kind of dream interpretation or something like that, you're not really going to want to have this conversation, or it might not be very, it might not be very effective. But when we do, like, let's say a listening activity, if I'm doing a listening activity with you where we're kind of looking at these things and they come up and now the person starts talking to me about it, we can continue this conversation, we can actually sit and talk about this, write a song about this if you want. I guess, I'm saying write a song about it, but I'm not necessarily going to keep doing that all the time. What I mean is that those things will be taken into account and then we start talking about these things. And so somewhere you have this feeling or you have this experience where you're being paid attention to at some other level altogether, So these small things that you don't necessarily want to talk about sometimes, it could be a small thing. It could be like, for example, these abstract thoughts, these meaningless things that you see very often, or these thoughts that come into your mind very often, makes no sense at all. So like, let's say I say to you that I have this, I have this imagination or something that I feel I'm on the edge of a cliff all the time. Mm-hmm. Now we can go really far into that, whether it is writing poetry about that or writing lyrics about that or talking about it or trying to understand what that could signify. You feel understood in a way that you might not necessarily feel otherwise.
That's very interesting. So maybe Kamal, like you said, earlier on, that it is basically eventually a form of therapy in a way, right? So maybe go in for therapy. There is this, unsaid pressure that you need to kind of let out your emotions, talk about things, stuff like that. Whereas when you are going for a music therapy sessions, that's not the first idea that comes to your mind, right?
That's not, yes.
So which is why it's more fluid in its approach, and it's very easy for you to kind of get more relaxed as compared to another modality. But eventually it kind of leads you to, rediscovering yourself or understanding your inner self much more than, what you would otherwise just sitting at home and listening to a music piece on your own.
Yes. Yeah, so these things that you listen, let's say we were doing an activity together, no? It would not just be about that activity. It will also be like all the other things that are going on during that, that process, which could be listening, which could be creating something together, which could be free improvisation. whatever might be happening, ultimately you're doing it from a space where, so we don't have any structure, no? So there's no like, okay, Sheetal, you play this and I'll play this and we'll play this. That might be useful in some situations, of course. Like if we're working with people, if you're doing an exercise where you're trying to regulate something for 4 or 5 people at the same time, you might use methods like that. But otherwise, we don't have too much structure. So everything that you do is you. There is nothing for you to rely on.
True.
You can only rely on yourself at that point, and that itself is a big discovery, you know. So if I was sitting with you in a room and I gave you, let's say, I don't know whether you play any instruments, but let's take for example, I gave you a drum and a xylophone or something like that, and let's say you've never played these two instruments before, you're not going to want to play it. Now for you to overcome that, all those judgments that you have of yourself, all those ideas of, oh, will people laugh at me, or all those kind of thoughts, the fears and things like this, you have to go over them by yourself, and ultimately you'll end up playing something. Now when you play something, you are discovering yourself also at the moment, right? So this small little thing that you're doing at that moment, now the moment you start playing, I'm waiting. So the moment you start playing something, I'm going to start complimenting you, following you, not verbally, through my, so I'll be with some instrument and then you'll play something, I'll immediately respond. And then I will start kind of following you, maybe leading you on, suggesting something, and then immediately you're also reacting to this. And eventually we're together playing, and you're like, okay, what is this? What's happening here? Something is happening here. It feels good. It feels great. It sounds nice. But there is nothing that you're relying on at the time apart from yourself. So that activity by itself can be very empowering.
Absolutely. And I listen to you and I really feel like possibly just playing on my table and tapping something and tapping a piece of music, right? So tell me something.
Yeah.
I mean, this, of course, we were talking about people with some kind of, mental health illness. But what about people like, us, maybe someone who's not battling a mental health, problem? So is music therapy equally effective? And why would one want to consider taking music therapy in case if we feel that nothing is wrong with us?
I don't really know the answer to that, but I feel like if there's something you'd like to explore about yourself, in terms of, if you recognize that your life is not turning out the way you thought it would, in ways that you're finding yourself too restricted, or you're finding that you can't be who you are and you have to be a certain way, because if you're not doing those things, you don't feel accepted. These are the kind of things we can explore.
Okay. And maybe de-stressing. I mean, everyone talks about,
Oh yeah, even simple things like that. Yeah, but that can be something you use music for on your own, no? Where you use it to, like, when you find yourself distressed, or when you find yourself anxious, maybe you can just find something to play as opposed to whatever else you do normally, and see how you respond to it. Because, like, let's say you take a simple beat, no, and maybe there's some urgency and you realize that, and maybe your method of dealing with that will be to find solutions. But what if you stop for a minute and maybe you just, like you said, tap on a table, get like a steady beat and just play it? There's obviously a reason behind that process that I'm suggesting now, but you don't have to know that reason. You don't have to know the reason why it works or why this is effective. You can just try tapping on a table, or tapping on your thigh, tapping on your chest, finding a nice rhythm, and then just playing that, and then see how you respond to it. Very quickly you will notice that your temperaments are changing, your emotion is shifting. These are things people can try on their own without even understanding what they're doing.
Absolutely. And I remember, Kamal, when I was back in school and we used to have these music sessions, right, with Spick McKay. I don't know if you've heard about them, but Spick McKay used to promote a lot of classical Indian music, and they used to go and perform like with if anyone. It could be a mridangam artist, or it could be, someone playing some other instrument, but essentially around Indian classical music. But that truly, I mean, I remember listening to the mridang once, and it was actually, out of this world. Like literally, I mean, we were very young to realize the impact of music as a therapeutic method at that point in time.
Yeah.
But I think that it truly, made our mood change. So, people who had scored bad marks, or they weren't doing well, or possibly were scolded by their teacher. I think we, in that 1.5 hours of that music being played, we just forgot about everything that had happened, and it just left us so elated and so happy. Just the fact that we were a part of that entire atmosphere when music was created.
Yes, so music does have that quality, So we all listen to music, right? The whole world, every single human being is either listening or taking part in music in some way or the other. So I think there's this understanding that music is only for people who understand music, or like there is this, this idea that, oh, music therapy, then, but I don't know how to play any instrument. So of course, music is created by people who know how to play musical instruments, or people sing when they know how to sing well. These are understandable things. These are facts. But maybe music is beyond that. It's not limited to that skill which we appreciate, or that experience which we appreciate, and maybe it's beyond all that. And because we all consume it, so if we are all consuming this, yes, there are people who are very skillful at this, in this method, or in this ability. They have very good skills, and they have very good technique, and they have a lot of talent, and they're able to express themselves in this medium very well. But maybe that's a limitation. I think music is beyond that. So everything that is based in sound, where you're responding emotionally, is this space of music that I'm talking about, is that response that we have emotionally, or that experience that we have emotionally through any kind of sound, which could be like a plate hitting against a wall, or a string on a guitar, or a table, or your hand tapping on your chest and getting that strong rhythmic grounding on your own body. So maybe it's not just about that music thing. It may be about sound, and how human beings are innately understanding it. Well, not consciously, but at least subconsciously understanding it and responding to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, Kamal, you are also an expert for a sleep wellness program, right? So tell me something. I mean, a lot of people might have the question in their mind that, oh, why do we need a music therapy session? Possibly just listening to an om chanting at night before going to sleep might just help me calm down, or maybe listening to another music piece that I've been listening to for possibly, a couple of times in my life, which I find very soothing, could be something which could just ease me off to bed. But that sometimes doesn't work. So tell me, how would music therapy, or, taking a session with you work, and how will it be different from, just listening to another recorded piece that is there out on Spotify or on YouTube or any other platform?
Yeah, so if you're listening to something on your own, it will help definitely, because music is this whole, okay, so sound is going to contribute to your life in some way, to your emotions in some way. So let's say you're finding it hard to sleep, you might actually sleep because that process of listening to music, if you happen to choose something that is relevant to what you're struggling with, and if it can create that stability, or that, let's say, grounding that you need, then it helps. But these are all very generic things, no? It's designed in general, and so you consume that and it'll help, because music will help. It's the same thing that we're using. We're facilitating the same medium. So how it would be different with, if you had somebody facilitating you at that moment, it would be more specific. So maybe we'll be able to identify the disturbance, which might be not something that is external. It might be an internal thing. So it's not just the sound of traffic, or the people in your room, or maybe somebody snoring. It may be beyond that. The disturbance that is leading to this sleep difficulty is obviously something a lot more complex. And if you have somebody who can facilitate you at that point, or who can maybe take you through this process of focusing on your sleep difficulties, then we can address that disturbance, whether it is a subconscious disturbance, or whether it is something that is conscious but not in your control, and so you're not able to manage it. This can be the difference, no? This can be the space where it will make a difference.
So how would a session with you work, for like a sleep wellness?
Or like sleeping disorder. If we were doing it online, it would be different. If we were doing it physically, it would be different. So if we were doing it online, maybe it'll look like this. So we will probably start with trying to bring up things that you're not aware of. So I might start with listening exercises with you, where I ask you to lie down, close your eyes, maybe try to find some kind of centering, and then I'll play something for you, which from my database. I don't want to use that word, but that's it's basically like a database of music and sounds, which might start showing me what you might be going through, But these are musical pieces that will start stimulating something, whether it's conscious or subconscious. And then I might start understanding what is going on here. You might start talking to me, and maybe I'll give you an example here, a very specific example, not in detail, but I was working with somebody who was having difficulty sleep. So in this process where I was starting the listening activity, right, I was trying to discover something here to work on using music. This person suddenly started talking to me about something that they've never spoken about for the last 12, 13 years.
Wow.
Because when they first talked about it, it was ignored. And this is going to professionals, right? Going to professionals for the sleeping disorder, getting medication. But when these dreams were spoken about, or when these experiences were talking, so they're kind of a mix between dreams and physical experiences that this person is confused by. Something happens to their body at that time. It feels very uncomfortable, and they want to talk about it, but nobody wants to listen to it because nobody knows what to do about it, right? It's a very strange description, and there's nothing anyone can do about it because this person says that their body feels like rocks, very heavy. Now, what do you do with this? So every time she spoke about it, people would just say, okay, yeah, fine, that's okay, but just do this, take this medicine at this time, eat dinner at this time, and then go to bed. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So that evening when it first came up, when this thing came up, and then this person told me, that the patient, right, told me that I've not spoken about this for many, many years because nobody really wants to listen to it. And honestly, I'm ashamed of this thing because it sounds really stupid. So I was like, let's talk about it. No. But it came up. It came up in the experience because she remembered this again. No. So we started speaking about it. Then we were just, as we spoke about it, it went further and further and further, and more descriptions were coming out, more details were coming up. Maybe that's all that's needed at that time. We're listening to music while all this is happening. So it's easier to handle it. So from there we move further, and then we're trying to see now, okay, if we go deeper into relaxation, if we can do another activity now where it's a little bit more deeper and the music is more silent, so you have to pay more attention to these things. Obviously, I've planned these pieces, no? So it's like, okay, now you listen to this piece. And as you're listening to this piece, can you focus on how your body is feeling? And if that thing comes back again, let's try and watch it this time and see what happens to it, like this. So we're engaging with that thing, which is that person. No? That human being goes through these difficulties, and we are there. I'm there with this person trying to deal with that issue without any judgment, without any question, there's nothing to refute or not refute here. It's just we're going there and we're trying to examine that and work through that. Eventually, the person was able to sleep.
Wow. I think that's very assuring to people who are going to take our sleep wellness program, and they will surely be looking forward to a session with you, I'm sure, Kamal. I think that, what also happens is that, when you are, or any of us as human beings, I think that what we crave for is to be heard, to be seen, and to be accepted. And that is something that happens during this entire process of, therapy along with music, right?
Yes, absolutely. Acceptance, but accepting not what you... So while we're doing all this, we're also recognizing what is us and what is not us. No? So like when I was telling you about that activity where you are playing these drums or this xylophone, which you never played before, you are also experiencing yourself in a way that you've never felt yourself. I mean, you've never experienced this part of you before, right? And everything you're doing at that moment, and I don't know whether I don't know whether my language is clear enough or good enough to explain this, but as you do that, Sheetal, you are absolutely yourself. There is nothing else there because you don't know how to play these instruments.
True. And I think that in itself is so liberating, right? That thing that, kind of holds you back constantly, where you are judging yourself more than any other person judging you, because you've already judged yourself that I won't be able to do this, right? And the moment that you start maybe playing something good, bad, ugly, whatever, and however you play it, I think it just boosts your confidence to another level and opens you up in
Yes.
so many ways.
Yeah.
True. So thank you so much, Kamal, for all this information. I'm sure that a lot of people would be looking forward to, kind of experience music therapy along with you. And I think after listening to you speak, I have started to understand that, how music therapy in itself can help me in my journey of growth and wellness. And I'm sure our listeners would have done that also. So thank you so much, Kamal.
Of course. Yes. Nice. It was a pleasure speaking to you. It was nice to do this.
Same here, Kamal. So thank you so much. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into our podcast. And we'll be back again the next time round. Thank you.